One of our viewers has asked, how do you help a child with executive functioning problems? Let's get into that. I think first off, as we get into executive functioning problems, which we both have some experience with, it's important to acknowledge that this is not a diagnosis. And sometimes it's treated that way. When you do a search online, for example, my child has executive functioning disorder or whatever, it's not an official diagnosis. This is really a description of a certain constellation of challenges or problems that a child has. And there's three main areas that it covers.
The first one might be considered the working memory. How do they remember what tasks they have to do? Can they take what's brought in and stay focused on it long enough to do a task?
If you think about a company, for example, the executive suite, okay, you've got the chief executive officer and the chief operating officer. The executives in a company are up at the top of the company and they control and manage everything that's happening down below it. So executive functioning can be compared to that. How does this child organize their world and how do they stay on top of things? So when you mentioned the memory, the working memory is part of that executive functioning. We have a little neighbor boy who was watching, I think it was Finding Nemo or something, and how Dory, the
has the short-term memory loss.
Short-term memory loss. And he's how old?
He just turned 5.
Just turned 5. And now he's picked that up. He's like, oh, I must have short-term memory loss.
Like when his mom said, why, you were supposed to pick up your boots or whatever. Oh, I am having short-term memory loss.
But that's a good example of what we mean by the working memory. They just totally space things off. Another area that is implied with executive functioning is cognitive flexibility, or as the case may be, inflexibility. Where they get so rigid in their thinking.
Yeah, this is a super common trait or the way they show up for children who are on the autistic spectrum.
Yes.
Very, very common. Just things are very rigid. I need it to be this way, or this way, or I'm not going to even function well. To be highly functioning executively implies that you have cognitive flexibility. You can kind of go with the flow, change as the circumstances change.
And then there's one other area of executive functioning that ties into one of the ones we've already talked about, but it has to do with inhibitory control. We all have impulses.
Yeah.
Right? And Vicki's better at controlling her impulses than I am at controlling mine. But children who have cognitive functioning problems tend to have a really difficult time just inhibiting those impulses.
This just brings to mind, I am a very tactile person. I love to touch things. If I see something of a different texture, I really want to touch it. And I notice this even at school, that sometimes I just am aware of it, that I really want to reach out and touch what that shirt feels like or something like that, but I inhibit it. Whereas the little first graders, I have this first grade teacher that I absolutely adore, and she has this velour one-piece suit, and I think, I don't know how you wear that in a room full of first graders. I think they've got to be petting it all day because they don't always have that inhibitory control yet.
Which is a good point, Vicki, because sometimes this executive functioning that we're talking about, we expect a first grader, for example, to have a higher level of executive functioning than they are developmentally capable of.
Yeah.
And so adjusting our expectations appropriately is one way we can help kids with their executive functioning problems. Well, let's get into a couple of strategies that we can use to assist children who may even be in normal development. But we've also talked about kids with ADHD, for example, where executive functioning problems are very common. Kids who might be on the autism spectrum, younger children. I
was going to say even just typical development.
Yes.
Realize that the executive functioning is something that is constantly being developed.
And interestingly, sometimes that's what people lose in later life, or if they have a degenerative problem. We've both got people in our family who have had Alzheimer's.
Right.
And executive functioning is one of the first things to go.
Yep.
Obviously the working memory, but inhibitory control.
Definitely.
Those impulses, they just can't control those anymore. So you can see that this is a description of problems that could come up in a variety of circumstances. Let's talk for a minute about some of
Yeah.
the strategic things we can do. Vicki, you've done some things with kids, especially in a school setting, to help them with organizational skills. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
When setting up organizational skills for children, a lot of the times you want to make sure that they have a place and a situation for everything, right? And so
Right.
very specific place to organize where their schoolwork is, maybe where they bring their backpack when they come home. As a personnel in the school, I know the children that you can send a note home with and some that you cannot because their organizational skills are not there, you know. And so as you try as a parent, you want to set up different times. Maybe you have very specific boxes or things where their toys can go, and maybe you have a kid can separate, maybe you don't have one that can separate, so it all goes in one box. But you're going to give them different organizational skills and try to teach them how to manage their skills according to their own personal traits.
Yes, and this could be as simple as an organizational system for their backpack, for example. We're talking about a school kind of an application, but this could be in the home too, where everything has a place, everything has a home. I remember you used to teach our kids this way. Everything has a home. Where is this thing's home?
My biggest one, the kids would probably remember, is gum has two places, your mouth or the garbage can. Which one's it going to be? Don't be touching it. Don't hold it. That was a big one for me because I found gum in the carpet too many times. But we want to help our kids organize. And this can mean also lists in a lot of different manners. One of the ways we would do organization a lot of the times is in our chores or our activities, what was expected for the day. So we've used things like popsicle sticks that you move from to be done to all done. You know, things might be cleaning my bedroom, brushing my teeth, doing the dishes, whatever. So you can use organizational tactics that way. Or you could make an actual list. At school, you're going to, even within a math problem, you're going to first do the addition or first do the multiplication. I got to go back to my maths facts, right? So you're going to list it out for kids, especially kids with executive functioning problems. A lot of the times they just don't know where to start. And so making lists is really important, and then teaching them the skill to go back to the list. So when they come to you and say, I don't know what to do next, you say, let's grab your list. You did this, you did this, so what would be next? And you're helping them discover what's next. This is so key. It's great to do in the elementary school year ages. Teachers are still really willing and available to help children. As you teach them to go to the steps, you're teaching them that ability to then go off at the secondary level and do it themselves when the teacher's not so likely to come over and point out the next step.
Obviously, also, you're going to adapt this to the development and maturity of the child. So the list might be simply visual pictures.
Yep.
The steps for brushing the teeth, for example, might be posted on the bathroom mirror where it shows someone pulling out the toothbrush and then putting toothpaste on the correct amount and then brushing the teeth for a certain amount of time. And then it can graduate to more written lists. I remember Vicki did this with our kids in terms of chores around the house. And so each room had a little list right by the light switch about what was required for that room to be clean to her satisfaction. And as long as they'd done everything on the list, they knew that they had accomplished that particular chore. So adjust and adapt according to age and maturity. Another thing that we can do to help kids with executive functioning problems is simply behavioral training. Now, we won't go into a lot of detail on this particular video because we've handled that in some other videos. You might check in with one called Teaching Children Responsibility, where we go through 4 steps. And those 4 steps can be used in this context as well. We've also got a video about working with kids with special needs. And there are some specific applications there that might be helpful too. The idea here is simply training these kids to do things in a way that you prefer. And it has to be done in a way that makes sense to them. When you ask yourself, why should my kid do this? You've got all kinds of answers. They don't have so many. So when I say behavioral training, I'm talking about connecting with those kids at their current level and stage of development in a way that's going to make sense for them. And there's a lot of tools there. We've also got tools in our Parenting Power Up program and in the parent coaching that we're providing. This is where we get down to the nuts and bolts of how to actually implement some of the things that you've been learning here on the channel. There's lots of challenges as a parent, but there's lots of resources too, and I hope that you're connecting with some of the ones we've created for you. A great place to start is with positivity, and you can get a free copy of my book, Pathological Positivity, by going to drpauljenkins.com. There's a link in the description. You can get a free copy of that book. There's always a lot of resources and tools, and we're honored to be on your team.
To the phone. And I wished I